Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is a podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. Do you ever have those conversations that just flow? You connect, you have a mutual understanding, and you could literally talk for hours. My next guest is called Johnny Lawrence. He's not from The Karate Kid, but he's perhaps even got a stronger message. Johnny's a self-development coach. He's the founder of the School of Self-Development, and he's also the host of the Self-Development Podcast. This is the 100th episode of the Move Your Mind podcast, and if I think back to 2020, during COVID when we launched this, I just would have never imagined that we would interview so many amazing people. From gold medal winning athletes to politicians to activists to wellness coaches, psychologists, psychiatrists, and everyone in between. And we really could not do this without you. I know I say this all the time, but the feedback from you, from our support base, means the world. There have been so many times, so many occasions where I've had messages from people that have gone and made real change in their life because of a message that they've heard on the podcast, from the book, from a talk, from a video, whatever it is. That's what makes me want to spread these messages in any format that I can to just get information across, not because I have the answers, but because I just want to be able to help facilitate bringing you the best information from the most credible people that I can get on this podcast. So thank you again, and if you'd like to join the Move Your Mind community, you can go to moveyourmind.me, and if you'd like to purchase the Move Your Mind book, you can go to nickbracks.com/book. Johnny, mate, thank you for making the time, and we're chatting before, and as I think happened the first time, I think the two of us just sort of got on well and understood a lot about what each other were talking about, and we probably should have just started recording, because a lot of these conversations, you know, we go on these different tangents and it turns into something. So as it happens a lot with these podcasts. So anyway, I'm glad to have you on here, mate.
Well, as we established the first time, I think we called ourselves philosophical twins.
Exactly.
We resonate on quite a lot of things. So yeah, it's not surprising that our hour-long chats take about 2.
I love it. Exactly. No, it's so true. And I think it's great, you know, in this space that we're in, being able to connect with people that, you know, have that similar mindset and similar view on things. And it's always refreshing. And I guess that's what we're trying to do with, you know, doing these podcasts, just encourage these kind of conversations and being able to look at things from, you know, a certain way and being able to spark that, I think. And a lot of people want to hear it. That's what I've, you know, found with my podcast. A lot of people find it really refreshing just to hear people having, you know, more on open conversations, and especially, you know, with men as well. We're sort of not taught to necessarily talk that way. I mean, is that something you found a lot with your work and with what you do? People, when they do, you know, hear these messages a lot of the time, they might be looking for it, but not have the permission to actually talk about it. It's sort of a relief almost to be able to feel like, oh, I can actually, you know, talk about these different things and my emotions and whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be quite dangerous to be our own counsel, can't it? It can be very dangerous to sort of ask ourselves questions, then answer those questions too, and to sort of, you know, be the gatekeepers of our own mind. You know, I mean, it's good to defend what comes in, but actually sometimes knowing what's going on in your own mind and then making sense of it yourself can be a bit dangerous. That's why it's so important that you meet the right people and you talk to the right people and you build that trust and you build that that sort of relationship with other, like, men to men, you know, like you and I talking. You know, it would have been in my life unheard of almost 20 years ago for two men to be sat together talking about emotions. You know, there would be loads of people making judgments about that. But now I think it's important because if I say to you, oh, I'm going through this thing at home and this is what's happening and this is how I feel about it, and this is the sort of behavior I've been going through, and you turn around to me and go, oh, mate, yeah, that happened to me, straight away I've got value from this conversation because I feel heard, I feel seen, I don't feel like I'm strange or anything like that. I feel a little bit like, right, someone can hear me, this is good, someone can see me, this is good, you know. It's got a lot of value, I think.
Massively. And, you know, and I experience that, you know, regularly in my own life. You know, there'll be things I'm currently struggling with, and you, even after, you know, doing a lot of this work and understanding it, on a conceptual level, it's very easy to get caught back up into thinking, no, but this struggle's unique, and what's wrong with me, and why am I finding this so hard? And then you talk to someone or you hear something, and instantaneously it's like, oh, relief. Like I'm not fucked up. Like there's something, I'm not unique. Like other people feel these same things in different ways, and we need to hear it, and it's like what I say a lot of the time. Like I have been in this industry for over 10 years and done so many talks and so much work in this area. But really the core thing that I did when I first started was just standing up, being vulnerable, sharing my story. And that's what worked. And really that's the core of what still works now above everything else, in simple terms.
Well, the beautiful thing about you doing that is that it'd be very easy to understand why people might make some natural assumptions about you. Good looking guy in great shape, has a relative success in the grand scheme of the world, and they can make all these assumptions about you, I'm sure. And I'm sure you've experienced that. But I can tell you straight up that that's not the case at all. That, you are a genuine person. You are exactly as you seem. There's no sort of like hidden agendas or anything like that I can see anyway. So, and I think that's cool. That's cool because people would make all these assumptions that it's easy for you because you're an attractive guy, because you've got influence, because you've got money potentially, that all of these things magically become easy. But as you may have well experienced, I've spoken to many people that have cried just as easily in their Ferraris as they would in a normal car, let's say. So, money doesn't buy happiness. Success doesn't buy happiness. Sometimes it can actually buy you some unhappiness. So it's about knowing that, isn't it?
Exactly, mate. Exactly. It can buy you 100% can buy you unhappiness, because I think you get put on that treadmill where then you're stuck when you get in that pattern, because then you're thinking, okay, this is the thing I've strived for. You're almost addicted to that chase, and it's like a drug. It's filled that void, momentarily. And now what's next? And I talk so much, I guess, because I've been living in New York, and just because of the conversations that come out of living in that place, because it is just so freaking crazy there. It comes up a lot. And we were talking about it before we started recording. And I was saying to you, like that's what I've experienced living there. You meet so many people where you can tell they're not happy, but they're just chasing their tail. They're addicted to stimulation. They can't sit still for more than 2 seconds. And it's all about actually convincing themselves more than the other person in a conversation that what we're doing is the best. There's nothing better we can be doing. This is so great, blah, blah, blah. But they're just unhappy, and they're not willing to sort of look at it from a different level. And it's not saying about what's right or wrong, but I think it's just, really about being honest with ourselves about, hey, is this actually sustainable for what I want out of life long term? And again, this is another thing we talked about before this started, sustainability. I think that's something that on all facets of life, we don't spend enough time talking about and thinking about.
But I think sustainability, it depends on how you're measuring it. For me, everything, is it everything? Yeah, mostly everything comes back to being in alignment with your values. Because if you're not in alignment with your values, it won't be sustainable, because you're not doing what makes you feel good. You're not living true to who you are. You're pretending to be someone else. That does not sound sustainable. It doesn't sound sustainable. But what people don't often realize is that, yes, we have values that are installed into us as we grow up, right or wrong. They might not be good values. There might be good values, there might be bad values. There might be helpful values or might be unhelpful values. But as they're installed in us as we grow up, as we come from being a child, a small child that's relatively helpless into an adolescent and into an adult, all of those values have to change because certain things challenge those values. When I can guarantee you that my value system is not the same as when I was 6. When I was 6, I wanted to eat lots of sugar and run around and just be crazy. And if I did that now, I'd probably get locked up. And then when I was 16, I probably had a very similar attitude to life. I would just swap the sugar for alcohol, more likely. And then as I get into 26 and 36, and it's like, I believe that there's every 10 years. And if you want to systemize it, let's say every decade of your life. When you're born, obviously you're sort of at the mercy of the world. When you get to 10, you start to build values. When you get to 20, those values need to change because you're 20, not 10. And the same when you're 30. A real common thing that challenges values, in my opinion, is having children. All of a sudden you have someone that's dependent on you, and you have to make decisions differently. Should I go out and party till 2 a.m? No. Because tomorrow your child is not going to care that you've got a hangover. It's just not, so that changes your value system. Yeah. And so when we talk about sustainability, I think sustainability in my eyes should be defined by your value system, and are you in alignment with that? And a good sort of analogy that I use with clients is if you think of your value system much like your phone, right? So I've got an iPhone, and every now and again it will prompt me to do an update. Yeah. And because I'm busy on my phone all the time, I don't have the time to update, and I keep telling myself, oh, I'll do it tonight, or I'll do it tonight, and I forget. And after a couple of weeks, my phone app stopped working efficiently. Things stop working on the phone, and everything is basically pointing towards, hey, you need to do this update on your phone. And that's a bit like our value system. Our value system is the same. We don't listen to these clear things that are sort of pushing up against our values, challenging our values. We don't listen to them. We just think, oh, maybe I'll just do it this one time, or I might just do it for a little while and then I'll stop. And I'm not going to do it forever. But actually you end up doing it for such a long time that things in your life just stop working the same, So that's when it's time to look back. And as we know with all change, the first step to change is about awareness. If you're doing something in your life, maybe you're selling something in a certain way that doesn't align with your values. If you keep doing that, you're going to cause damage to yourself. You are, I think, so it's important that you become aware of it. And then obviously the next step of change is to take accountability for it, to say, hey, listen, this is on me to change it. It's not down to anybody else. And then after that, you might have to accept a few things and then move forward. But yeah, I agree. If something is unsustainable, I believe it needs to be measured up against your value system. In short.
No, well, I love that point. I think that's a very, very, I love the example with the iPhone. And I think it's a really great way you've put it, and just such a good way to look at it, because otherwise we could sort of feel like we're flying blind, or we might have, we might sort of be putting pressure on trying to change certain things. But again, like you said, how's it going to be sustainable if it's not tied intrinsically to, what we really care about, what we value, what we want. So being able to take that, pause and really work out what are my values, then regularly check in on those, like what you're saying, I think is so important. And I know, in my own life, I've always, and, to this day, whenever you're sort of going against it, you can feel in your gut, okay, something feels wrong, and it feels, it's like a weight. It's like you can feel this heaviness, and you just know that something's not right. And then if you can stop and actually look and do what you're saying, and okay, let's check in, where are my values? Where am I at? What am I doing? You can often see, okay, I'm sort of, this is not aligned. How do I reassess this? And I think we all know that feeling.
Yeah, you're right. And we become really well practiced at ignoring that feeling, and then we start to believe that, something, I'm depressed, or I'm happy, or I'm anxious. A lot of anxiety comes from, you're not aligned with your values, you're having to do something, and it doesn't make you a bad person. That sounds like I'm saying, oh, you're a bad person if you're not living out your values. But a real good indicator of this is, I remember when I first moved to Cornwall in the UK, where I live now, and my wife and I were looking for jobs, and she was desperate to get work, and she took a job basically collecting money off people for on the phones. And they did all this training with her to help her basically put pressure on people to pay up and stuff. Now, my wife is one of the kindest, most honest people you'll ever meet. It did not align with her values. She was so unhappy in that job. And it's because there was a risk, to be honest, at one point, that she was going to start paying people's bills. So I was like, listen, you might have to leave this job. But when something's out of alignment with you, it feels a certain way, and people become really good at ignoring that feeling. But what you practice grows stronger. We have to realize that if we're living out of our alignment with our values, we have to take a pause, as you put it, and just reassess, and make changes. There'll always be necessary for there to be compromise. It's very unusual for you to get everything you want in life, isn't it? You know, you're always going to have to compromise. But I think knowing that you're doing your best to live in alignment with your values, or simply just knowing what your values are, you know, a lot of the time, if people are out of alignment with their values, they don't even realize. They don't realize. And, you know, sometimes you might have to compromise certain things in order to move forward. And that's okay, as long as you know that's what you're doing.
Exactly. No, and you don't realize, and I think realizing that, you know, we have choices. We don't have to always go with, like the example you said there. You know, we can reassess things and we can make changes, and we don't have to get it perfect, but we can also, if we do make the wrong choice or it doesn't feel like it works for us, there's always another option available to us. And obviously, sometimes we might be in a position where you don't, you know, you have to work, you have to get a certain job, you need money, you know, you're in a situation where you feel stuck, and there's certain practicalities, but at the same time, it's reminding yourself that there's always another way to approach things, and we can, you know, having that mindset, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and sometimes I think we can allow other people to push their value systems on us, and that can be quite dangerous because you know, especially if you go into a new job and everyone shares the same values, or it's growing amongst the workforce, a trend or a culture, and it gets taken on as like a value system, and then you're sort of expected to toe the line, you know, and do that.
Exactly.
And if you don't, like, for example, I'm sober, I don't drink any alcohol, and that's my choice. But one of the things that I made sure I didn't do from the beginning was become one of those people that preached it to other people, or even gave the impression that I didn't like drinking, or didn't think or thought drinking was bad. I don't have any issues with drinking. I love it when people are drinking around me and they're having fun and all those things. It just didn't work for me. People say to me, "Oh, why did you give up alcohol?" And I say, because I wasn't very good at it. It's as simple as that. But, you know, I wasn't very good at it, and due to some sort of pretty significant childhood trauma, I used that as a way to avoid my emotions for quite a long time. But I could go into a job now and there's a heavy drinking culture. I have a choice. Obviously, I'm not going to drink alcohol, but how do I handle that situation? You know, what do I do? Do I, you know, at some point, somewhere in there's a compromise, you know? I'm not going to get everyone to not drink around me. That's not a thing. I'm not going to neither want that or would pursue that. But what will often happen is other people will say, it will offend them that I don't drink. You know, I'm accepting that everyone around me drinks, but they're not of me. They're like, they think I'm strange or weird or whatever, you know, and it's just, they're like, you don't drink any alcohol. It's like completely unbelievable to them. They're like, really? It's like, so things do challenge it all the time.
Which is another thing to navigate. And I guess that's other people, you know, either just not having that, just being, you know, shocked, or projecting, you know, their own insecurities onto you. I've seen that a lot of the time when you know, periods where I have stopped drinking, and people will be wanting to encourage you to have a drink with them because they don't want to have it reflecting to them that, oh, does that mean maybe I should reassess my behavior as well? And, you know, and there's no, like you said, no judgment, no right or wrong, but I think it just goes for anything that we're doing, you know, whatever it is, it's not going to, again, be very, you know, it's going to be hard to navigate if we're putting provisions on, okay, I want to quit drinking, but I can only do it if I isolate myself from any situation where it's going to be presented to me, or people are going to ask me to drink, or ask why I'm not drinking, or, you know, project all these things. Then how the hell are you going to stop? So it's got to be, how do I, you know, live by this and still immerse in environments where it's around, because that applies for so many things. You know, if we want to, I guess another example would be cutting down on, you know, using social media and screens and all that kind of thing. Like it's not practical to just, you know, go into a cave and hide away from the world, because this stuff is part of the world, and we use this technology in our careers and in what we're doing. So we've got to find, how do I actually find that balance where I still can be part of these things, but use them in a healthy way. And, you know, it's a constant navigation, but I think finding that middle ground is the key to, again, you know, going back to that word sustainability, having that longevity in these healthier behaviors for ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's about using boundaries to create harmony, isn't it? I hear people all the time talking about work-life balance and finding that balance. But when we think about the word balance, balance means the same. When something is balanced, two things are equal. When I don't know if that's achievable, because there are, I know for yourself, like hour to hour, your priorities change, right? Right now, your priority is to talk to me on this, and then in a minute it'll be something else, and then in a minute it'll be something else, and then in a minute it'll be something else, you know? So our priorities always change. So I think it's about finding that harmony in life, you know, where things feel right at the time, you know? And I think that comes with boundaries.
I love that.
Certain boundaries need to be put in place. It doesn't have to be anything harsh. It just means, you know, there are certain things that we and you both understand, you know, like a boundary for you. I know it isn't, but a boundary for you might be, hey, Johnny, don't swear on my podcast. And I'll be like, cool. yeah. You know, and there you go. It's a boundary.
We crossed that one quite early, didn't we? I crossed that one. But yeah.
Well, from what I've experienced about you, you do that quite early doors anyway. That's all right.
Yeah.
But that's you. That's your authentic self. And I love that. Like, why should you compromise that? It's your podcast. Why not?
Exactly. It doesn't matter. No, but I think it's such a good point in having those boundaries. But then, I think when it comes to saying I need work-life balance and I need to, you know, we can create extra anxiety by trying to do things that aren't necessarily achievable. And I mean, it might be different for other people, but I know, like, if I look at life and how it works, it's not really practical a lot of the time to be like, okay, this is my specific working time, this is my leisure time, this is my blah blah blah. It's like, okay, great, we can have like a rough idea about how we try and do that, and obviously, you know, not just become a workaholic and have no life outside of it, but there's got to be a bit of flow within all of it. And how do we blend it, you know, together a bit more? Because that's how, especially in this, you know, modern sort of day, how things operate, like it's going to be very difficult if we're trying to be so rigid about everything. So it's got to, you know, I think people can strive too hard to, Yeah,
you're so right. Because I mean, I think for me, that all became so much easier once I was able to actually let go of any assumptions or expectations. Now, that's a practice, don't get me wrong. I use the word practice all the time because it removes that pressure of perfection. You know, when we practice things, it means that we are open to the idea of sometimes that not really working out the way we wanted, you know, or whatever. But I think once I let go of my assumptions and expectations, I was able to let go or at least become aware of at the beginning some of my attachments and preferences and judgments of things. And once I did that, I realized that that's exactly what they were. They were my attachments, my preferences, and my judgments. They're not fact. They're not right or wrong. They are just what I think, you know? And once I realized that, I was like, right, okay, so now I need to be more open to maybe that I'm a bit too attached to this, or maybe this is my preference, but it's not that person's preference. And maybe my judgment is wrong on this occasion. And once you open your mind to those things, it becomes a little bit easier to not make those assumptions of people, you know, or when I meet somebody, because we all do it. When we, you know, when we first met, you know, you judged me. Now, judge sounds like a negative word, but it's not. It's just you look at someone and you make certain assumptions about them. And based off of those assumptions, you will have expectations of them. But all that does is guarantee you that at some point you're going to get some sort of disappointment. You know, that's all it does. Because, you know, I might, you know, you come across a certain way, but I'm pretty sure that you're not like that all the time. There must be times when you're very grumpy and tired or hungry or whatever, and that's okay too. But my assumption and my expectation means that that's not allowed anymore. Matter of fact, I prefer happy Nick. No, I don't. I prefer happy Nick. Could you be happy Nick now, please? So now I've got to perform for you. You know, it becomes like that. You know, so it gets a bit bad. So I think, if we could do our best to sort of practice letting go of our assumption and expectations of things, then we can definitely then realize, hey, this is my attachment, this is my preference, this is my judgment. That does not mean it is so. You know.
Thank you so much for supporting Move Your Mind. We're expanding the offerings of the organisation, and we're tailoring everything we do to suit you guys and to try and answer to all of your needs and the questions that you send in. The book is available globally. You can find all of the links at nickbracks.com/book. And we've just released the Move Your Mind community. We've currently got a men's community group, a women's community group, a general group. We're going to be loading up other groups, and you can find all of the links at moveyourmind.me. This group's been created based on the needs of what we've heard and learnt throughout running Move Your Mind. And we have live events, we've got courses, we've got huge amounts of value, the ability to share information, share ideas, work in groups together to grow and share your learnings, to learn about different topics. You get email reminders. There's a whole lot of features in there. We're constantly updating it, and we're so excited to share it with you. You can find all of the information about it at moveyourmind.me.
That's it applies, and you know, I think it's such a huge topic what you're talking about there, and you know, people pleasing. That's something that for me is such a big one, and that sort of applies to that. Where on, you know, you make those sort of put those provisions on yourself where I need to, even when I'm not feeling this way, actually inauthentically present this image and behave in a certain way because I don't want to let people down, and I need to only show that positive part of myself or whatever it is. And
it's a pressure there,
it just applies to. It's such a pressure, and you know, and it's just it's not good for anyone really, and you feel like it is, but I think at the end of the day, people again, you know, like the authenticity when if you can show that, but it's such a hard thing, and putting these pressures on ourselves. And I love what, you know, going like trying to look at it the way you were saying, where practice, you know, let's just look at this as a practice, not having that pressure. And because I am such a perfectionist and I have to battle that and put pressure, and I want to achieve all these things. Like everything I do, a lot of the time it'll start out as a fun thing, and very quickly it turns into, why is this not, you know, I need to become the best at this. And a recent example, and my girlfriend, who's in the other room here, is constantly trying to, exactly. And she's constantly trying to tell me to just enjoy things more. And because like a recent example would be, I started making these skits on Instagram and TikTok and mental health ones, and you know, actually thoroughly enjoy doing it. It's fun. It's something
I
new.
love them, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it, mate. But
they're brilliant.
But very, very quickly, even that, it will turn into, okay, I'm looking at all these other people that have, you know, 10 million followers, and they're getting so much, influencing so many people through doing it or whatever. And I'm like, why is mine not blowing up? I need to make more. What are they doing? I need to make one a day now. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I'm like, I'm hating doing this now. This is not fun. And then
because it's become competition,
pressure, and then you go back to, and then you remove all of that and you realize, oh, and it's happened to me with acting as well. I'm just like starting to get back into it now. I got this itch to do it again, but it became, fuck this shit. I don't want to do it anymore because the pressure's so huge that I'm putting on myself that it's actually not fun. So it's like, it's so hard to find that middle ground. Is that something you find difficult to balance?
Well, as a practice, again, it's so important. If you could introduce that word practice into your life, it's a game changer. It's like if me and you were going to go to the gym, right? And we were going to do bench press, and you had a number in your head, right? And you started setting all of these perfectionist traits into your workout. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I have this expectation. I'm making that assumption. I'm attached to this. This is my preference. These are my judgments. Boom. All up in a gym workout. Apart from the fact that's a very intense start. If you go in there, you've got no choice but to fail at some point in that. But by practicing, you make that failure part of the learning. That's what you do when you go in. You're like, right, I'm practicing. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to take what happens and I'm going to learn from it. That is what practicing is. You know, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to attempt to do this. My intention is to do this. But if that doesn't happen, I'm going to take what happens and I'm going to learn from it. You know, and what we have often is something I called life currents. Yeah. And it's like, I'd imagine from Australia, you've been caught in a rip before. You've seen someone caught in a rip. I got caught in one at Bondi, which was fun.
Right. Yeah.
I got caught in. No, it wasn't. And it was quite terrifying for a bit. But like, you know, we could even look at a very still water. And underneath that water is a whole bunch of currents that want to pull us different directions, and they're very, very powerful. And when you're in them, they are scary. They are terrifying. But what if you just acknowledge that they're there and let it take you where it needs to take you? But, you know, don't do anything about it. Don't take any actions or swim out to the side or whatever it is that they ask you to do, because them life currents are there and they're going to want you to do things. You're going to feel that compulsion, that urge to do this or do that. But you don't have to. You don't have to. You know, you can acknowledge them. And it's what I heard you say earlier, that you were battling perfectionism. That is the problem. We need to accept things. And like the greatest lesson I ever learned in my entire life was I am allowed to accept something. Now, it doesn't mean I like it. And it doesn't mean that I'm welcome it into my life. It just means that I accept it. And if I accept that I've got perfectionism, and that I have a tendency sometimes to look at certain things and get a bit intense with it, once you know that, you can actually laugh about it, because you can sit there and say to yourself, here I go again, here I go again. And you start laughing and look at me, what I'm doing now. Now all of a sudden I want to be this and I want to be that. Oh, it's quite funny really, but it's okay. You know, it takes away all the judgment of yourself and all that. Oh, you're stupid, or you're this, or you're that, because you just laugh with yourself. You laugh with yourself about it because you've got perfectionism. And instead of battling it, you just make it part of who you are. I know that when I do this, I'm going to want to do this. I'm going to want to do that. I'm going to feel those compulsions, those life currents that are going to pull me towards this. But I don't have to. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not going to attach any meaning to it. I'm just going to realize that it's just part of my perfectionism. It's one of my little quirky traits. You know, and then you don't have to be so horrible to yourself about it then, because that's the other part of it. You have perfectionism and then you get pissed off at yourself for having perfectionism. And it's just like a massive thing that you can't win. You're right. And then when we talk about comparison, I realized a while ago that actually when I see something in, you know, I might be scrolling through social media, and like you said, I see someone else who's doing really well, or something I define as really well. And I start to get like loads of animosity about it. But I always say to clients, like, why don't we switch that animosity for aspiration? What that person's just done is just given me a very clear indicator that that is something I want. Great. Thank you for allowing me to realize that that was a goal. Now it's a goal of mine and I'm going to go for it. The problem was that person was going for it and I wasn't. I didn't know I wanted that. Now I do. So now I can make it part of my plan. And eventually you'll get closer towards it. And the fact is, you can't really compare yourself fairly unless you're comparing yourself to yesterday. And that's the person you was yesterday. And that doesn't mean that you know, you go in the gym and you lift 100 kilos on Monday and then you go in the gym and you lift 200 kilos on Tuesday. It means that, did I get an extra hour's sleep that I was looking for? Tick. Did I have one less biscuit with that cup of tea? Tick. You know, these small little wins that are going to bring you somewhat closer to being a better person than you was yesterday. And that's during the pandemic, getting out of my pajamas, that should have been an achievement. You know, I was podcasting through the pandemic and I was literally, if I stood up, I was wearing boxer shorts. That's not good.
Same here.
That's not good, man. You know, so, you know, that to me, just getting changed and sticking some jeans on, that was a win at that time. You know, but I just think we're so hard on ourselves, and I see it in you, because I have it in myself too. And there's nothing wrong with that, wanting to be better. There's nothing wrong with that. But it has to come from a place of accepting yourself first. And what that means is, I love my job. I just want to get paid a bit more money for it. That's the analogy I like to use, you know, because when I say to people, oh, you need to accept yourself in order to accept who you are now in order to change it, they say, well, that's contradictory. I say, well, it's not, because unless you know that you accept yourself now, how are you ever going to make any changes? The analogy is, I love my job, everything about it. I just wish I got paid a bit more for it. That's the analogy I use, and it seems to resonate with people. But yeah, it's difficult.
No, I think that's a great way to put it, because then it doesn't sound as overwhelming or as complicated or as out of reach, but because it can become this very black and white thing. And like you're saying, you know, you see someone on social media that is achieving what you want or what you've realized you want at such a high level, and you get resentful and frustrated, and then you project it onto yourself and what's wrong with me and blah, blah, blah. Whereas, you know, you can just give yourself permission to think, okay, that's, you know, good on them. I'm where I am right now. Do I want to be there? Do I wish I was there now? Sure. But this is where I'm at. And how exciting is this that because I've seen someone else has actually achieved this thing, they've given me a blueprint and they're literally showing me that this is possible, because if they've done it, then there is a way to do it.
Absolutely.
You know, it's actually a positive. Yeah. If we
Yeah,
remove our ego from it.
Exactly that, removing our ego, because our ego is a necessary thing. But don't forget, your ego was created by your conditioning. So everything that everyone has ever told you and taught you has created that ego. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that ego has your best interest at heart, because the funny thing about ego is that it's always searching. And it's only when it stops searching that it becomes useless. So why would it do itself out of any work? Your ego doesn't necessarily want you to find what you're searching for. It just wants you to keep searching. You know, that's why when your ego is constantly telling you this isn't good enough, or you deserve better, or you're better than that, you're this, you're that, because it doesn't want you to find what you want. Because once it does, it doesn't have a purpose anymore. You know, it's all your conditioning. You know, it's all it is. I mean, it's funny you said there about emotions, right? And I think that is probably the one. If I wanted anyone to take anything from our conversation from me, it would be the importance of our emotional regulation and understanding our emotions. I can't tell you, like when I went sober, as I said, because I realized that I was using alcohol as an avoidance tactic from my trauma, and my trauma was showing up in my life in unhelpful ways. You know, and that was affecting my relationship with my wife. It was affecting my relationship with my kids. It was affecting my relationship with my friends. You know, not necessarily in a catastrophe type way, but for me, it wasn't good enough. I as you know, as you are, you strive to be a bit better, don't you? But when I went sober, I stopped drinking alcohol. That was the first thing, right? But then a little while after, I started realizing that when I get what most people would call a craving, yeah, so people would say, hey, he's having a craving for wine, let's say. I realized it wasn't a craving. And by calling it a craving, I was giving it loads of power, because there's a helplessness to the word craving. Craving makes you feel like you've got no control or you've got no choice. It's just this thing that's inside you that's out of control, right? But then I realized, well, no, it's not. It's a reaction. That feeling is a reaction to something else. What is it a reaction to? A very difficult emotion that I'm either unable or unwilling to experience, right? So I'll be in the kitchen, me and my wife are having a difficult conversation, and I start to feel the emotion of rejection. Yeah. So my first thing is, I'm gonna have a drink because I want to avoid this horrible feeling that I'm feeling right now. Yeah. So that's my reaction. It's not a craving. It's a reaction to a difficult emotion. So once I realized it's a reaction, the wonderful thing about the word reaction is it's got the word action in it. I can do something about it, apparently, you know? So in my early days of sobriety, because I'm always like you, I'm always self-learning, I'm always self-teaching, I'm always trying to take what I can from every situation all the time to knowledge. It's relentless. It's quite tiring.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was coming up with something that I ended up calling the ABC method. And what I learned was an emotion can only really last 90 seconds. It can only have an impact on you for 90 seconds. If it carries on past that, it's because you're judging that emotion, attaching that to that emotion, you're thinking about that emotion, or you're in some way, you know, I always say to people, don't think your feelings into a problem, you know? Yeah. So I can sit there and I can feel rejection. But as soon as I start attaching to that rejection and applying meaning to it and then taking that meaning and judging it on myself, all of this stuff is just all stuff I'm thinking. It's not really happening, right? That's when I perpetuate this thing and make it carry on. So what I need to do, in a sense, is get through that 90 seconds. I need to get through that 90 seconds without attaching to that emotion. So I'm standing in the kitchen feeling rejection, right? So the first thing I have to do is acknowledge that, because we won't do it. We'll just have this feeling. We don't want to go anywhere near it. So we go straight to the avoidance or whatever it is, right? So first thing, letter A, acknowledge. I need to acknowledge the emotion I'm feeling. Okay, I'm feeling a bit rejected, right? Now, rejection comes with anxiety or anything, but anxiety is just fear without breathing, right? So breathe, deliberately breathe. for 90 seconds, take away to breathe. And one of the ones I love is called Slow and Silent. And it's where you close your eyes and you breathe and you try to take away the sound. Now, if you're a perfectionist, that's fun. That will definitely last longer than 90 seconds. You'll be there going, I can still hear myself. So
exactly.
So that's the second one. So A is acknowledge, B is breathe, and then C is communicate. Communicate to yourself what's just happened. I was feeling resentment. I've breathed through it, and now I'm okay. I haven't attached to it. I haven't judged myself. I haven't created any uncomfortableness. I've just gone through it, and I haven't drunk any alcohol, because let's face it, that bottle of liquid has no power over me. It's just a bottle of liquid, but I give it the power. I assign that power to it. So understanding our emotions, I've got this wonderful chart. I don't know if I showed this to you last time, but it's this chart that one of my good friends made, and it's got all of the emotions on a color. So quite often when I'll be talking to a client and they'll tell me about a situation through their eyes, and I'll ask them always, what was the emotion you were feeling at the time? And quite often they won't know what the emotion was. So I list all the emotions on here. I've got all the emotions here, and they look through them and they'll go, oh, scorned. That's how I felt. I felt scorned. I said, great. So that was your reaction. Your reaction was to feel scorned. Yeah. So, and the great thing is about, the communicate bit at the end is that maybe some of that emotion that you were feeling needs to be communicated, not just to yourself, but to somebody else. So maybe that means I need to go back to my wife and say, at the right time, obviously, not when it just happened, but you say to her, hey, that conversation in the kitchen earlier, that made me feel really rejected. And I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, she'll go, oh, I didn't know. Sorry. No, that's not what I meant. And you'll get this explanation that makes you feel better, So emotions and understanding our emotions is one of the most important things I think we can do,
I couldn't agree more. And no, don't be sorry. I love that explanation there. And that's like, I was listening to that and I'm like, that's really helping me, listening to you talk about that and reinforcing a lot of things that, I'm even, right now working on. And, to the point of what you're saying, a lot of the time, what used to be my natural thing to do was, if I'm in the moment feeling that emotion, I'll be trying to, like what you were saying, communicate it, talk about the actual frustration and analyze. So it might be, working on a project and you're just feeling stuck and you're feeling this severe emotion and frustration. And instead of acknowledging the emotion and realizing, like what you said there, just sit in the emotion, let it pass and move on. I'll be trying to talk through the frustration and the problem, and it leads to a tangent that turns into a bigger problem. And you could spend, 30 minutes doing that, or an hour just trying to talk about something that can't be analyzed and can't be
doesn't
discussed.
Have to be.
And then, doesn't have to be. And later on that night, when you feel clear again, you look back and you're thinking differently, and you can waste a lot of time rather than thinking, what? Okay, I can't logically rationalize what's going on right now, but I'm feeling this emotion. I'm just going to sit in this. I'm going to maybe go for a walk, whatever it is, and then reapproach it. And I think whenever you get used to doing that, like you're saying, you can really you can take so much pressure off and save so much time and just make life so much easier for yourself.
Life currents sit right in their moments. They always do, because they make you feel like there's something you need to do or say or something. There's something that needs to happen. But actually, the hardest thing in the world is to do nothing. It's to sit there with resentment and not do anything. Just breathe.
Yeah.
One of the biggest mistakes, I think, and it happens a lot more in men, I would say, is men mistake anger as an emotion. Now, anger is great. Anger is there. It's an alert system that our body has to let us know that our boundary is being crossed. And then it also provides the energy for us to put that boundary back in place. But anger is not an emotion. It's a reaction to an emotion. And that would, when I realized that, it's like, okay, I'm angry. So someone comes to me, I'm angry. Right. Okay. Nothing I can do about that other than wait for you to not be angry. But if you say to me, I'm angry, and I say, what are you angry about? Oh, because what you said in the kitchen made me feel rejected. Right. Now we can do something about it. I can't do anything about anger. And men go to. when it comes to anger is it's like, right, that's what I'm going to go straight to being angry. Right. And then I'm going to build this massive narrative around my anger. And then I'm going to maybe even lean into a bit of victim mentality as well. And it's just like, well, wait a second. This is not helping anybody, but if I want to communicate, if I want to move past the problem and I tell you I'm angry and then I tell you what I'm angry for, not why I'm angry, what's made me angry, because I don't really know why, not in that moment, Yeah. And if I do, I'm going to start guessing, and then I'm probably going to end up insulting you in some way because it'll always be your fault, right? Not mine. So I say to you, I'm angry. This is what's made me angry. That comment that you made in the kitchen made me feel rejection. That automatically gives you the opportunity to put that right, because you can go, oh, I didn't mean that. I meant this. And then straight away, that rejection feeling goes away. Oh, good. Right. Sorry. Got it. But instead, what happens, we go all into our anger. We accept the anger as an emotion and we be angry. And then we say, I am angry, which makes us angry. It's like, well, you're not angry. You're just experiencing anger. Anger is a real trap. A lot of the time, anger surrounds jealousy, rejection, embarrassment, disappointment, all horrible, horrible emotions that are not comfortable to experience. But then it begs the question, is that saying, isn't it? If you're going through hell, keep going. So if you're experiencing anger because of jealousy, rejection, embarrassment, and disappointment, why attach to it? Just let it carry on. Carry on walking through, because most of the time that anger, jealousy, rejection, embarrassment, disappointment can be explained by somebody. It wasn't necessary. Like, I'm pretty confident that your girlfriend doesn't sit there in the other room thinking, how can I make him jealous? How can I reject him a bit more? How can I embarrass him? How can I disappoint him? No way that she's thinking that. If she is, you might want to get a new girlfriend.
I agree.
But let's be honest, we know that that's not what's going on. We know that, So what that means is that there's another explanation that's going to be more helpful to you, because that's the other part of it as well. It's finding those things that are helpful instead of those things that are unhelpful.
It's a 10-year anniversary of Bracks, and we've relaunched with the classic white pair. We've also got new styles coming out super soon. We're donating $1 from every pair to mental health, currently to 1 in 5. You can find all of this at www.underbracks.com.
Yeah, totally. No, I love and I think, like we said last time, I think we could probably chat for another 2 hours. Is just like each one of these things that are coming up, we could probably spend an hour on just each topic. There's so many things. I think we're going to have to do another follow-up interview. But the one thing I haven't even asked you about, which I want our audience to you've alluded to a few things, but just to give our audience, and we'll have links to, what you do and your website and everything else in the show notes. But can you just give a quick background on, I normally do this at the beginning, but we've talked about so many interesting, exactly. But just for them to get a bit more of a overview of yourself, could you just give a bit of a background on what you do and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, I specialize in human behavior. I'm not an expert, because expert suggests I know everything. If you think you know everything, you're probably on the other side of the mountain going down, not up. So I specialize in human behavior and self-development. And the reason I do that is because I spent the first 25 years of my life allowing my experience as a child, which was a survivor of child abuse and a witness to domestic violence. My dad was a very, very violent man. And I spent my childhood watching him hurt my mother and my brothers and sister. And that was hard, that was very hard. And it shaped my belief systems and my value systems very early on, and created a very fear-based outlook on life. And, having looked through my life and looked back on my life, I realized that there were 3 contributing factors to that. The first was that I was mixed race. My father was black, my mum was white, and I'm growing up during the 80s at a time when that wasn't accepted, let's say. People had certain opinions and feelings about that. One of the stories I tell often was watching an elder man spit in my mum's face in the queue of a post office because she had a mixed race child. And watching my mum stand in the post office queue wiping saliva off her face is something will never, ever leave me, Yeah. So there was a lot of, and if I want to be compassionate, it comes from fear. It comes from fear. People didn't understand or know what it meant, that people that looked different, behaved different, spoke different, ate different foods, listened to different music, all these different things that challenged their belief system about life and all that were coming into their world. And it was scary, and that's okay. But I don't think it's okay to spit on people and to do the things that were done to me as a kid at school. So out in the big wide world, I didn't feel accepted because I was mixed race. So that plays into my outlook and my perspective of life. Then at school, I found myself later in life at 30 years old, I found out I was dyslexic, but at school I was made to believe I was stupid. I was also undernourished, so I was never athletic, So at school I wasn't feeling accepted as well. And then obviously at home, I was going through all the violence and the fact that I was just feeling this feeling of fear and rejection from my father all the time, and watching my mum navigate this and watching the fear in my brother and sister's eyes. So that was hard too. But I think what I realized later in life, as I started to address my addiction, which was to alcohol, because that was how I always managed to get through things. And it wasn't until my wife had our first son, and I'd been through some therapy before that, but and ironically, I didn't realize until I went to therapy that my dad had done so much damage to me, because I didn't think that way at that time. I was just quite happy to ignore it. This horrible little feeling I have all the time, I'll just drink it away. That'll work. Because I ended up having to leave my family home at 16. I moved out on my own at 16 years old because I was getting bigger. And it was getting to the point where when my dad was doing things, I was stepping in. And it was only a matter of time before that situation was going to go the wrong way, let's say. So my mum suggested that I moved out and I got a council place and I lived on my own. And that, around that time, it was a massive shock for me. And I tell this story because around that time was my first ever time when, I can't say I was suicidal or anything like that. I don't think I should go that far, but I did have a feeling of wanting to give up because I was working all the hours God sends. I was working 2 bar jobs. I was bringing in some newspapers out of newsagents, and I was working in the supermarket some evenings, stacking shelves. So I was working all these hours and I still didn't have any money. At the time I had this gas carb meter and I didn't have any gas, which means I didn't have any heating and I wasn't able to cook anything. And I remember walking home one night and I was crying my eyes out because I was just like, surely life can't be this hard. I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm watching all these people going to college, having fun, doing all these, having all these experiences that you should have as a teenager. And there was me working 4 jobs, living on my own, and still had no money. Didn't have any time to educate myself or anything like that. I didn't even think I was good enough to educate because I was dyslexic and was told I was stupid. So I was going through all this. I got to the end of this alleyway and on the floor was £20. And I thought, are you kidding? Are you actually kidding me? There's 20 quid on the floor. And what that taught me was never, ever give up. Ever, ever give up. Because that moment before you give up, that moment you give up could be the moment just before you find your version of that 20 quid, Yeah. Because you don't know what's around the corner. You just don't, and life is trying to help you win. It's not always trying to kick you down, man. It is trying to help you win. But what I ended up realizing was that I had got all these traits from my father, right? This training, if you want to call it that, right? So I had hypervigilance. I had a feeling of dread all the time, which is sometimes described as depression. I had fear and paranoia. I had catastrophization. You could tell me anything, and I would catastrophize it. that was my magic power. Yeah. And then there was this inbuilt self-hatred that was constantly reinforced to me as a child by my dad. But what I learned to do was something called reframing. So what I do is I take my hypervigilance, and I originally looked at it as a negative thing, right? Hypervigilant because I always had to judge my surroundings all the time in case violence was about to erupt in the room, right? But now what I realize is that hypervigilance is I notice my surroundings and it helps me find opportunities. When I'm working with my clients, I'm not just listening to them. I'm watching their mannerisms. I'm listening to the tonality of their voice. I'm listening to the pauses that they make in between words, and I'm assigning meaning to it all the time. What does it mean? What does it mean? How's this person feeling? Is this person lying to themselves? Is this person telling themselves the truth? Where can I find something helpful to help them move past whatever it is that they're finding challenging in their life. And that all comes down to my hypervigilance. So it's a gift, you know? And then there's my feeling of dread. Well, we both know that the feeling of dread, excitement, nervousness, is the same hormone. It's only our interpretation and our perception of it that creates what it is. So actually that feeling of dread is not nervousness, it's not anxiety, it's actually excitement. So I'm going to be excited. My palms are sweaty because I'm excited, not because I'm nervous. I feel a little bit sick because I'm excited, not because I'm nervous. And, you know, people might say you're lying to yourself, but you're not, because it is your choice. It is your choice. So I'm an excited person. I've not got this feeling of dread. I've got this feeling of excitement. And then there's fear and paranoia. Well, again, I could battle that all day long, but why would I? Because it's there for a reason. It's there to keep me safe. And I'm grateful for that. But I don't need it right now, you know? And then there's catastrophization. Quite often, if you challenge that, you'll realize either it's not true or actually it's not as bad as you think it is. Once you challenge it, once you say, you know, I always say, ask why 5 times and you'll get to the root of the problem, you know? And then there's self-hatred. I just remind myself the good things I like about myself, that I'm a kind person, that I like to help people, you know, things like that. So once I did that, that's when my self-development really started. And it wasn't until my wife gave birth to our first son that I had a different perspective on my upbringing, because I held my son for the first time. And yes, I had all of these feelings of love and you know, wanting to help my son grow into a man and all these different things. But I also had this other rivaling feeling of like, how could my dad do this to his son? I don't understand. And I became a bit unraveled around that time. And that's when my sort of like psychological journey started. That's when I started to really start to want to understand myself, not just in principle, but actually really understand what my emotions are and why they're there, and start reframing some of those early experiences. Because I didn't get the choice of how I see the world. It was shown to me in a very violent and aggressive way. And that wasn't fair, you know? So what I got to do is, in a way, reparent myself and teach myself what all these things meant, you know? And what that ended up leading me to become is a personal trainer at the beginning. So I was a personal trainer for quite a long time. And it wasn't until I got to my 40th birthday, when I was looking over all of my testimonials, I realized that no one mentions fitness in there anywhere. Everyone says, Johnny helped me change my life, help me look at life differently, help me do this, help me do that. Obviously they lost weight, but that's only because most of the time when somebody gains weight, it's a symptom of something that's going on in their head, you know, some sort of unhappiness. So obviously they always lost weight or they always achieved their goal, but it wasn't necessarily because, yes, okay, it's because they worked hard in the gym and they ate better. But essentially they wanted to do that, whereas before they didn't, you know? And that, so once I realized that, I thought to myself, well, maybe I need to move into being a coach. And once I started doing that, I realized what my calling was, I suppose. And I started working with people my ethos is this, is that I don't believe that I have any answers for anybody. I'm not going to look at somebody and say, I know what you should do. I've got all the answers to your problem. I'm not that arrogant, but I know that they do, because the answers to you for your life are always within you. And there was this analogy I heard once about a stinging nettle. And it is that if a stinging nettle stings you, the antidote to that sting is within the leaf. But the thing is, I've never met anyone that's ever tried it, because guess what? Fear stops them from doing it. Because if you've just been stung by something, you're not going to grab it again and start scrunching it up and rubbing it all over yourself, are you? So we'll never know if that's true, I suppose, because I've never met anybody that's done it. But that's the same with the problem that you're experiencing. Not you personally, but anybody that's experiencing a challenge or a problem in their life that they don't know what to do about. They have the answer. They just know that the answer is scary. And they don't want to go anywhere near it, because that answer might mean you've got to leave your partner that you've been married to for 10 years. That answer might be that you've got to leave that job that you've been in for 20 years. That answer might mean that you've got to leave Australia and move to New York. You know, all of these things are terrifying. They're scary. They're big actions. So guess what? You're going to procrastinate and put it off for a little while. And my job is to hold up that mirror and show people, no, this is your reflection. This is what you're saying. This is what you mean. This is how you feel. I don't physically say it to them. They hear themselves say it. And that's the magic of coaching. They coach themselves. I just hold that space for them because most people aren't able or willing to do that because it's a terrifying space to hold. So, in short, that's how I got to being a coach.
Mate, well, thank you so much for sharing it, number one. What an amazing story. I mean, so many, and I think we definitely do need to do another interview just because there's so many things I would like to go deeper into from what you're talking about. But in short, I think it's an incredible story. And, you know, as you were saying, as you sort of went through that journey and then getting into fitness training, and then from that learning that the thing that resonated was more the mindset side of it and what you were, you know, actually giving to these people on that holistic standpoint, and then leading. I'm a huge believer that everything that we go through leads to the next thing and prepares us for, you know, what we're meant to do. And we sort of, it's like a puzzle coming together, and we can't see it being put together at the time. And often it can feel like we're so far from where we're meant to be, but it's when we look back that we realize that all of these pieces needed to happen when they happened. And I think we need to then, the more we can learn that, remind ourselves that, okay, I might not understand what's going on right now, and I might be going through a difficult time, but I've got to trust in this, that this is preparing me for, you know, the next thing, and it's all going to come together. And I think your story is, you know, such a great example of that. So yeah, thank you for sharing it, and, you know, love everything you talked about today. It's been mate,
incredible. As always, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We always go way deep. You know, exactly. We always go way deep. But I mean, if I can leave anyone with anything, you have far more control over your life than you allow yourself to believe, and all of the learning that you're looking for will come from those painful experiences that you've had, because sometimes you can only learn not to touch the flame by touching the flame. But once you touch the flame, you damn sure never touch it again. You know,
exactly.
But you've got to let yourself believe that you have the power. You really, really do, because you do. You do have the power. You know, you are in control of your own life. You're in control of your own destiny. And I absolutely know that very many times in a life, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you're not. Just means it doesn't feel like that. And if we can make that sort of distinguish between our feelings and what's real, because we're allowed to feel whatever we feel. I'm sure, as confident as Dwayne Johnson looks, as we said on your podcast, I'm sure he stands behind a curtain before he goes out and delivers a speech, or before he goes out and does a big scene. I'm sure he's sat there telling himself all sorts of things, you know, but we'll never know. We'll never know, you know. So, yeah, you've got far more control of your life than you allow yourself to believe. And when you're ready to take control, life will work with you. I promise you that.
Absolutely. I think it's a great one to end on. And I almost forgot, we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. So these can just be, you know, very quick, whatever quick answer comes to mind. If it's possible for us to do it that way. Yeah, exactly. But we'll see how we go. But anyway, the first one we ask, which, I mean, based on your story, obviously saying you had, you know, a very difficult upbringing, but the first one we ask is, what's the best childhood memory that comes to mind for you?
Ironically, I never got to see my dad very happy very often, but he did love boxing. And one of the things that I look back and remember was him laughing and smiling and watching it playing and doing boxing. You know, I suppose if I can hold on to that as a happy memory, it's helpful.
That's so nice. And it's, you know, to be able to have experienced what you experienced, and then be able to still have that mindset of looking at, you know, how can I have a positive memory instead of holding on to the anger or frustration that came out of what you went through. I think it's a really powerful message. So
well, he's native Nigerian, and from what I gather from speaking to other family members, he was subjected to public floggings as a child. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm sure he's dealing with his own things. And I think sometimes if you can just look at things through the lens of being compassionate, it's going to be helpful to everybody. It has to be. Doesn't mean I'm not still angry and I forgive and all that sort of stuff. It just means I accept what happened and I understand that he was having a hard time too.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in society at the moment?
biggest burden. How do you mean? I'm not sure I understand that.
What do you think, or what do you think one of the biggest issues on a societal level is when it comes to mental health at the moment? So whether it's, social media or
right.
Just one, it doesn't have to be the biggest, but one of the biggest ones, do you think?
I think social media has a huge impact on us, both helpful and unhelpful. But I think when you see past that, I think it's our inability to nurture resilience by understanding the emotions that we're feeling, and actually understanding what the emotions are. People don't have very good emotional regulation these days. And I think that that's not the reason we don't have it. It's because no one ever taught us how. That's it. You can't be angry at somebody for not knowing something if you didn't teach it to them. That's like me being angry at you for not being able to speak Chinese. Like, why would that be a thing? No one ever taught it to you, but if you can understand your emotions, you can realize that resilience can only be built through going through hard things,
It's a great way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. What's your personal definition of happiness?
My personal definition of happiness is firstly to know that it's a fleeting feeling. It's not a constant state, and that we are experiencing happiness every day. We just don't acknowledge it. That's great. Yeah,
that's really, really, really nice way to put it. I haven't heard it put in that exact way before, and I think that's really good. I like that. What are you most afraid of?
My biggest fear is to get to 90 years old, sit back in my rocking chair and think, I wish I had. Regret. Yep. That's my biggest fear, is to look back, to not be able to do anything about it, and sit back in my rocking chair at 90 years old and wish I had just tried. Even if I tried and failed, I'd accept that over never trying and never knowing what would have happened, because that drives you mad.
Exactly. I share that with you. I think, it's like, it's regret, isn't it? It's like if you look back and you gave it everything and it didn't turn out how you expected, but you at least exhausted all of the things you wanted to try.
And had fun trying, and had fun trying. No matter whatever we qualify as failure, we damn sure had fun trying. Absolutely did.
Yeah. Exactly. Final one. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? What am I most proud of? My children. I'm most proud of my children. I shared a story with you before, didn't I, about a recent dad win this weekend? Or I don't like to say dad win. It makes it sound like I'm taking the credit, but I love my two sons, and they impress me every day. And believe it or not, as young as they are, they teach me something every single day if I'm willing to listen. If I'm willing to look past my ego and see that when kids tell you things, they tell it to you from their conditioned self. From their authentic self. They haven't gone through life yet, have they? And had all of their limiting beliefs given to them, and all of their sort of assumptions and expectations of the world. They're very pure, and actually very often they'll tell you something and you'll think it's not that simple, but actually it probably is.
Exactly.
So I'm really proud of my kids. Really, really proud of them.
That's great. I love that because we learn to overcomplicate things, analyze things, put all these provisions in front of it, all this conditioning that we get taught, and kids don't have that. And there is so much to learn from that. So I love that answer. And everything else you talked about, like I said, I think we could, go on for hours, and
easy.
love having love having these conversations with you, mate. So really appreciate you doing it. So for anyone listening, we'll put all of this in the show notes, but where should we send them if they want to learn more about you?
I suppose the biggest platform I'm on is Instagram, and it's growing slightly on TikTok, but I don't know about you, but I find TikTok is quite slow growth, but we're getting there. But I go by the self-development coach. The reason I go by the self-development coach is because my actual name is Johnny Lawrence, and Cobra Kai came out and ruined my life. So that
I
would
was
be-
going to mention. I forgot to mention that last time. Yes, I was watching Cobra Kai recently, and I thought, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Let's just say that when you type in Johnny Lawrence into Google, I'm nowhere to be seen. Yeah. And as much as I might want to throw some money at my SEO, but I am not going to beat Netflix. So, to be honest, it's partly that, but it's also the fact that I've genuine when I say I've dedicated myself to helping as many people as I can with their self-development. So if you want to find me, go to the Self-Development Coach on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. And my website is schoolofselfdevelopment.com, where I sell the Super Self program, which is a program that helps you go from where you are now to where you'd like to be. So, check that out if that's something that interests you.
Love it. And we'll put all of the links in the show notes, and make sure people don't look up Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai. Look up the real Johnny Lawrence, the one that we want to find on Google.
Yeah. Thanks, mate.
Yeah,
I need the help.
Yeah. So, I appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much. I appreciate you making the time.
No, thank you, bud.
Thanks to Johnny Lawrence for joining me today on Move Your Mind. If you'd like to purchase the Move Your Mind book, you can go to nickbracks.com/book. And if you'd like to join the Move Your Mind community, you can go to moveyourmind.me.